why are young people ditching car ownership? Well, to talk about that phenomenon, we decided to bring in George Eny, who is the head of the Automobile Protection Association. Good afternoon, George.
Good afternoon, Tom.
How are you today?
Excellent.
Great. Glad to hear it. Are you preparing for tomorrow's apocalypse, or
I'm prepared.
You're prepared. Do you have those? I'll bet you have those tires with the studs on them and stuff like
No,
that. No,
actually, I don't.
No way.
I leave the car at home. I'm near public transit. I use it.
That's the
the metro is brilliant when the weather is bad.
Yeah, because it doesn't. There's no freezing rain underground. That's the big advantage of the metro. So, George, what do you make of this Angus Reid study that shows that young people seem to be shying away from car ownership?
Well, it's been going on for some time, but it's more obvious now because owning a car has become so expensive. If you're buying like a starter used car, so that would be a vehicle that maybe you could have bought for $5,000 to $8,000 before the pandemic. Today it would cost you double. Your insurance will be much higher as well, especially if you're not in Quebec or one of the public auto insurance provinces. So if you go over to Ontario and you're a young driver, your insurance payment will be higher than the car payment in many cases.
Especially if you're a first-time driver as well. That's where it really.
That's right. So you have the combo of experience. So how many years since you've had your license, and also your age. So under 25, particularly males, are higher risks, and they pay much higher premiums in the private insurance provinces than in the public ones, or even in Quebec where it's a mixed system.
Mm-hmm. So do you think, you talked about the expense of owning a car, and that's one reason altogether, but what are some of the other reasons? Does the environment have anything to do with this?
Priorities. So younger people are more into other things. Mm-hmm. They like travel. Right. They like food more than older generations. Electronics might be using, and subscriptions for electronics, probably be using a larger portion of their budget than many earlier generations. And so I think generally on an emotional level, people maybe covet other things other than a car, and maybe that means that they're less likely to have one. There are other options as well. If you live in one of the larger cities, I'm thinking particularly Montreal, Toronto, and Vancouver, there has been evolution in transit and in transit patterns. So here we have the Bixby system. You do have a subway system. It's not for everybody. If you live downtown, it's relatively compact, and there's been a movement toward younger people moving into town, into smaller places, and so they can save quite a bit and use that money for other things or for savings.
Now, out in rural areas, I know that it's like a rite of passage. Young people, they need a car if they're going to get anywhere, if they're going to get to work, if they're going to get to university. They need a car, but you see this more as an urban kind of phenomenon.
Yes, although people living at home longer can, double up or borrow a family car, but typically if you're outside of areas that are served by public transit, places where Uber isn't really a regular option, where there isn't car sharing. We have a very big car share program in Montreal. Communauto has done amazing work in terms of getting people access to a car without actually having to own it. And so if you don't have all of those options, ultimately you need a car to participate fully. So you can do some of your socializing, some of your life can be lived online, but ultimately in more remote areas, people do end up wanting to have a car, and they're going to be paying more for it these days for a used car because prices are way up.
That's for sure. That's you see that everywhere you look. Now, do you think the industry is going to have to change to perhaps make car ownership more reasonable or perhaps more attractive in some way for younger people?
The car makers used to consider the entry point as a inexpensive new car important because they wanted to capture that person and bring them into the brand. And certainly the domestic car makers now think that your first car is going to be a used car, and they don't have any specific program to bring you in. among the imports. The cars are still, new cars, still too expensive for many people, but Hyundai, Kia, Nissan have sort of continued to invest heavily in models at the lower end, cheaper models. And it is bringing them business. There's no question about it.
Are they doing anything to make it easier to finance a car?
There are discounts for recent graduates, but realistically, until you have an income, you're not going to be financing a new car. It would be a used car. It'll be a mixture of money you saved and perhaps help from a relative. And if you're financing it, you'll be paying a high interest rate. Typically, before COVID, a person buying a brand new car would be paying from 0 to 3 or 4%. And a used car today is more like, if you're not like a very established credit risk, even if just you pay your bills, but you haven't been doing it for that long, 8 to 10% is not unusual on an older used car. That's a lot. So we tell people, try put money down and don't buy more than you need so that you're not paying too much in interest, so that you can pay the car off in 3 or 4 years if possible.
Right. Now, is this a blip, or do you see this turning around at some point in the near to not so near future?
Pre-COVID, this always ended when the person or persons were turning around 30, early 30s. Mm-hmm. So they could have stayed out of the market until they got their first really good paying job, or were living as a couple and starting a family. And at that point, they went and bought a car. So it was a delayed purchase. Mm-hmm. It wasn't a purchase that you would never make. And the question is now, if you do this survey in upcoming years, is that what we're going to see? As this cohort gets older and sort of participates differently in society, as family people raising children, at that point they'll need a car. Maybe they'll only get one. That would be different. But often when people move to the suburbs to raise children, it's 2 cars, one for each head of the household.
Right. George, thank you very much. It's a really interesting insight into this phenomenon that younger people are staying away from car ownership. I appreciate it.
I would like to give you one piece of advice to the listeners who are on the fence on this. We don't recommend you buy a car if you can get by without it, but we do recommend you get your driver's license. It's much easier to learn to drive before you're working a steady job. If you're in between things, like you have 3 or 4 months off between school, do it then, and it will be easier than if you're trying to learn to drive in your early 30s. That's
a good sage piece of advice right there. I can verify that with 3 daughters in their 20s. So yeah, they all got their licenses pretty quickly. Thank you very much, George. I appreciate your time today.
My pleasure.
iHeartRadio is throwing it back.
2010s, the decade.
To the days of huge hits and unforgettable anthems. A non-stop stream of the biggest and best.
Drake, Rihanna, Beyonce, Katy, Gaga, The Weeknd,
and more. All your decade-defining favorites, all in one place.
Hi, it's Katy Perry.
Hey, it's Bruno Mars.
This is Kesha.
Find 2010's The Decade on the free iHeartRadio app. Preset the station so it's always one tap away.